nutrition and professional performance. What I've started to find really odd in recent years is how, in a corporate setting, we spend thousands on our learning and development budget, and then a fair chunk on a wellbeing strategy, without realizing that the two are so inextricably linked. We study leadership, we do courses in change management and program management to optimize the organization and make the organization optimal. But then we don't necessarily ever kind of turn that back and think about how we can apply some of those principles to ourselves. So I'm here to bring together those two areas of learning and development and physical well-being so that we can optimize our personal success, whether that be in work or at home. So I had to think about, who in the professional sphere really successfully brings together these two areas of learning and development with well-being and best applies it to their role. And it probably comes as no surprise that I think that's an athlete. And I'm really happy for anybody else to suggest any other areas, probably astronauts, I would say as well. And this is all around this idea of kind of, marginal gains. Any marginal gain that individual can achieve as an athlete is ultimately going to help in terms of their performance and performance under stress, critically. So whilst, in the workplace, we're in a lunch meeting reaching for another disgusting sandwich and a cup of really average coffee, the athlete is really carefully considering what they feel their body worth in terms of optimal performance. So when was it that our performance at home and in the workplace became so separate from how we look after our bodies? So let's see what we can pull from this analogy throughout this session to get you really feeling on top of your performance, and importantly, feeling like you have capacity for more. And you don't have to want more. Success doesn't always have to be driving for more, but this feeling of having capacity for more, for either other life priorities or just to feel less overwhelmed, I think is something that we could all really benefit. So please give yourself permission to have a little bit of time now to focus on what this really means for you. As Ed said, the session will be recorded, so you can look back at bits if I go over anything too quickly. And also please share with anybody who you think might also benefit. I'll keep on flip-flacking between the slides and questions, so if I don't answer immediately, I'll pause at various points to do so. And then if anyone's got any more personal questions, we can stop the recording at the end and we can ask those questions in a slightly smaller forum. So as Ed already mentioned, I am a women's health and leadership consultant with a background with 15 years in the military, developing high performance teams and instructing leadership, but also postgraduate qualifications and now clinical experience being a nutritional therapist. And what I really like to, or what I kind of specialize on doing in clinic, is supporting female leaders and busy women to optimize their energy and their hormones so they feel that they can be present and lead with resilience and with confidence. I do this one-to-one, I do this in a workplace setting, and kind of most importantly through my signature program, She Thrives, which brings all of these areas of leadership development together with physical well-being. And if you want to have a little look at my homepage, there's a QR code to have a little look at a bit more depth about who I am. But more importantly, let's focus now on you. So what are we going to cover? Firstly, we're going to look at what success actually even means to you. And then also, what do you need to feel? Who do you need to be in order to achieve this success? And then we're going to have a little look at the success saboteurs. What is it that stops us achieving this? We're going to go back over the high performance pyramid. So anyone who's listened to any of my sessions before, this will be familiar work, but I would like to know if you've reflected on it since last time and if you've managed to put any strategies in place. And then we're actually the nutritional bits at the end. And that might be quite funny. I'm a nutritional therapist, so why is the nutrition bit right at the end? This is because there's so much work to do first on getting you to appreciate and really value how physical well-being is essential to your success. And the more time we spend on this trying to achieve that mindset change, then the more successful you'll be in terms of nutritional change and supporting your physical and mental well-being through those nutritional changes. But again, I'm really happy to answer any questions if you feel I don't touch sufficiently on the nutrition bit at the end. Okay, so I want you to have a little think now about how you define success. This could be professionally, it could be personally. And I also want you to question, and I think this might be due to my background in the army, is that genuinely what you think your success should look like? Or is it what an organization, an institution, another person has told you what it should look like? And there's a big difference. Success needs to be authentic. So have a little think. You might want to write something down. You might want to type something on your phone. there might be some words that really just jump out to you. And again, if you want to share any of those on the chat, I'd really welcome that now. So please let me know if there's anything in the chat that anybody wants to share in terms of what success looks like for them. You know, for me, when I was in the army, success was very much about pushing for the next command, pushing for subunit command, pushing for unit command, making sure that other people kind of recognize that I was competent. I know my success was really defined a lot by what other people thought of me. And I think I've been through a big kind of journey in terms of my physical and mental well-being, completely flipping that success is something really personal to me. And it doesn't need to be defined by my rank, my role. It doesn't need to be defined by how busy I am, how packed out my diary is. Actually, is defined for me now as the mark I leave on the world, you know, the change that I instill in others. And I'd really like, if anybody else, you know, it's quite a personal thing. So if you're just writing that down, then that's great. But if you want to share anything, then please feel free to do that. So now we've got a little idea of what success looks like for us. And I hope I've not caused any existential crises of people thinking, oh my gosh, I've just realized that's not my own view. That's what the organization wants of me. You know, sometimes we need that. And now, what do you need to be to get there? You know, so if you think about yourself having achieved success, and I think quite visually, so think of this image of what you look like when you've achieved your view of success. Now I'll give you some adjectives of how you would describe yourself in that picture. You know, if people walked into a room and saw you in this position of success, how would they describe you? How would they describe you to others? What are you known for being? Are you focused? Are you passionate? Are you dedicated? Or is it slightly more kind of, is it being more empathetic, being calm? What is it that you need to be? What characteristics do you need to have in order to get to that place that you deem as success? And again, if anybody wants to share anything, then feel free to do that. Or just write down the kind of keywords that kind of come to the forefront of your mind. Don't overthink it. It'll come to you kind of quite quickly. You know, so for me, I think now the words that I really try and resonate more on are being calm, being capable, and really being empathetic. And that's perhaps not what I would have perceived previously. So keep that idea. If you've written it down, great. Keep that idea, because towards the end, we're going to look at how we support that image, how we support that picture of you in whatever it is that is success for you, how we support that through physical well-being and nutrition. Okay, so what sabotages our means of achieving success? You've got this image of what success is for you, and there's obviously a journey from where you're at now to where you want to be. And that journey is not going to be linear. You know, it's going to have natural bumps. It's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster. It might go backwards before it goes forwards again. But it can be really useful to think about in advance, you know, what are the key things that are going to sabotage this successful journey for you? Chasing the wrong view of success, you know, somebody else's perception of success. Comparing yourself with others, seeking perfection, trying to prove our value to other people, and, you know, really relying on other people's view of yourselves to justify success. Also fear of failure, you know, that really does often hold us back. I think there's a lot around kind of presenteeism and feeling like you just have to be there rather than actually taking time for yourself to be able to have the cognitive space to come up with what it is that you need to do to get you to that really successful place. Having insufficient resilience, potentially due to presenteeism, potentially due to being too worried about what others think about you, not feeling confident, fear of actually showing up as yourself. You know, all of those, you know, let me know if any of those kind of resonate with you. But also at the bottom here, you can see poor mental health and poor physical well-being. And those last two in bold, I would say, and so will others who we're going to talk about in a minute, that these are absolutely foundational to trying to improve all of those other sabotaging factors that I've listed above. You can't expect to be able to think clearly about success if you're not nourishing your body with the food it needs for cognitive clarity, for simple energy production. You know, it's a simple kind of biological process, and also for hormone balance. And all of those things are so heavily influenced by how we look after our bodies. You know, if you're stuck in overwhelm, if you're fighting fires, you feel like you lack agency, that's not the ideal position to get you on this journey to reaching that little image of success. So I'll just quickly flip back and see if anyone else is typing anything. Great. Okay. So some of you who have listened to my presentations before will recognize this image, and I make no apologies. I'm not trying to cut corners and reuse slides, but I'm showing it because it is so foundational. It's not my own. I'd like to say it was. I need to work out how I can write my own book about it on a slightly different vein. This is the high performance pyramid. So this is this idea that if we want to get to this level of high performance, optimal performance, there's actually a number of foundational steps that we need to have in place first. And each of these levels profoundly influences the next one up. And failure to address any one of them will compromise your ability to get right to the top, to the peak of your performance. And today we're mainly going to focus on this area of physical capacity, this foundation, and how that impacts emotional and mental capacity. And what I find amazing is that your leadership and development training programs should be beginning at this physical level, because this is absolutely fundamental. It's our source of our energy. It is foundational to how we perform, both professionally and in our own private lives. Sarah, easy to identify with lots of saboteurs, hard to know how to fix them. I know, isn't it just, and I don't think it's necessarily, I'd love to say it's all going to become really clear at the end of just this webinar, but we all know that the journey to kind of clarity isn't necessarily that quick. But what I really invite you to start with, and what I think is so important, is to work out your values, what's important to you. And that will shape what your version of success is, because so many of us are holding on to a version of success that has been put onto us through education, through our professional careers, through other people's desire to see us succeed, but in their terms. And from that, I think you can start to unravel some more of those saboteurs. But what I'm going to argue in a minute or put forward is that actually just eating well is such a simple step and gives you that cognitive, or supports that cognitive function to give you that space. So Sarah, I hope that helps a little bit. And I'd like to know if you think there's any kind of further clarity by the time we get to the end. Okay. I have to put this book cover up, and I have to stop myself laughing every time I do so, because have you ever seen a more masculine book cover? I know it's from 2020, but oh my gosh, they were not appealing to the female reader, were they? And I've got it in the back actually. I meant to bring it and have it on camera, but it makes me laugh. Anyway, separate issue about book cover design. So many principles from this book are so relevant, and I particularly feel relevant for women at the moment who are trying to juggle everything and achieve professional success, but also still be happy and have personal success at the same time. So ignore the front cover of the book, ignore how old it is, but there's some really key principles that we want to take forward. And what this book really talks about is this top of this pyramid is something called the ideal performance state. For the athlete, that's when they're in a competition and everything's going so smoothly, they can visualize success, they've trained perfectly, they've absolutely nailed their nutritional goals, and the race feels easy and they win. That's the ideal performance state. Ultimately, that's what we're trying to get in a professional capacity, a corporate capacity. But the athlete, after a race, will rest, will recover, will rehydrate, will probably have a really carefully balanced meal based on what it needs to refuel its body to be able to prepare again for that really stressful event, that competition. However, in the workplace, we go and grab another cup of coffee, we go and grab a chocolate bar, and we go sit back at our desk and eat probably quite an underwhelming lunch from the work cafeteria. And I just think it's really funny how we expect ourselves to be in this competition state all the time without actually thinking like an athlete about how we prepare ourselves for stress, and also about how we rest our bodies. So first I'm going to mention rest before we go on about training for stress. So actually stress isn't the real issue. A lot of us think that in order to optimize our success, we need to remove stress. And again, I'm here to put forward a slightly different argument, that the focus isn't on removing stress, it's on focusing on how you respond to stress, how you train for it. And suddenly, when you're not focused on removing stresses, training for stress feels a lot more achievable. And it's actually this oscillation between stress and energy renewal, or rest and recovery, that is going to be essential in optimizing your performance. And it's only really when we can do this that we can balance our nervous system, and we can allow ourselves to optimize our physical well-being and start to kind of address some of those success saboteurs. So in terms of micro rests and resting, it's not necessarily about lying on a chaise, although you might want to do that, or going to a spa. Micro rest. How do you take yourself out of that stressful environment? Is it 2 deep breaths? Is it closing your eyes just for a sensory rest? Is it putting some headphones in? Is it looking out the window and looking at nature for a couple of minutes? Is it some 4-7-8 breathing? So again, I just invite you to question how you respond to stress. And now I'm going to talk about training for stress. and training for optimal performance. So let's take forward this idea of this oscillation between stress and rest. And in terms of training, a lot of us will know that the athletes will train for an event by taking themselves almost to a certain level of a stress exposure. So a runner will train for a running event by running. But we just kind of throw ourselves in the deep end at stressful events at work and just kind of hope for the best. So what I think can be really useful is focusing in on an acronym called NUTS. And some of you who've done any kind of reading around the idea of stress might have heard of someone called Dr. Sonia Lupin, the founder and director of the Center for Studies on Human Stress. And she's come up with this acronym of NUTS. So these are the type of events that stress us. And what I find really useful is once we start to understand and be able to identify the type of things that are going to stress us, we can then think about how we might train for those events and how we might optimize our physical well-being so that when we're in those stressful events, we can perform optimally. So, NUTS. What stresses us out? Novelty, novelty, something new. They're changing all the IT systems at work and you've got to switch to a whole new way of working. You have been given a new laptop and it just doesn't quite do what you want it to do. Or something personal, like expecting a new child. It doesn't have to be something negative. It can be something really positive, but it's new, and that can cause stress. Unpredictability. No way of knowing that something could occur. So for example, my child being ill today, I didn't know that was. Maybe I had a little inkling last night when there was a slightly high temperature, but I had no way of knowing that necessarily was going to happen. Or teachers and doctors going on strike, or a really unpredictable boss where you can't quite work out, you can't predict how they're going to respond to an event. Threat to the ego. People questioning, or you thinking that people are questioning your ability or your methods. Or your child's teacher kind of saying, and how much reading are you doing with your child every evening, Mrs. Meadows? Things that kind of start to make you question your ability. And then the S, sense of control. You're in a hurry to get to an important meeting, and the train's delayed, or the bus is cancelled, or your car breaks down. You've got no control over that situation. Or your child is diagnosed with like a really serious illness and you don't feel like you can help them. You're powerless in helping them with that diagnosis. So NUTS. So thinking about the type of events that are going to make you feel stressed, and therefore those are the events that we're wanting to train for and that we need to rest in between. So how do we train for these events to optimize our success? Some of you might have heard of something called hormetic stress. These are stressful events that cause a positive adaptation in our body and actually improve our resilience. So for example, exercise is a form of stress, but the physiological adaptations, stronger muscles, more efficient use of oxygen, better heart functioning, all of that improves our resilience to other stressful environments. Other hormetic stressors might include ice baths, cold showers, sauna, high intensity workouts, breathing practices. They're all ways that we can use to develop our stress response. What I think is also really, really important is to remember, not only do we have kind of the more conventional tools in terms of optimizing our success and identifying stressors, preparing ourselves kind of mentally for that next stressor, allowing ourselves rest, it's also understanding that the food that we eat is going to have a huge impact on our ability to achieve success and our ability to respond in an optimal way to life's inevitable stresses. So I ask you now to kind of think back to that image you had of what success would look like, and think back to those words that you feel you need to be in order to embody that picture of success. Nicole, feeding the body feeds the brain to assist us in reaching our goals. Absolutely, 100%. And it makes so much sense when we say it out loud like that, and we all kind of go, yeah, well, of course it does. But in our daily lives and our habits and our practices, and in a corporate culture, we just don't have We just don't do it. We somehow there's a disconnect between what we know helps us, and then when we're in a stressful environment, what we actually do is almost another form of self-sabotage, not prioritizing the self, not resting, presenteeism, not fueling our body adequately, reaching for coping mechanisms in alcohol, in caffeine, in sugar, all of those things impacting our cognitive ability and our ability to achieve that picture that we have of success. Okay, so let's move on now to look at the nutritional bit. And I'm really happy to answer any questions that anybody has kind of as we go through. So for me, I mentioned the words that I feel I need in order to achieve my view of success is about being empathetic, about being calm. And there's probably something about being able to think strategically. I can't, as a business owner, be stuck in this firefighting overwhelm. I need to feel like I've got capacity for more. I need to feel like I've got agency. And I need to be really happy in who I am, because I've got to project that, because that is ultimately my business. And equally, like you all have your own personal brand at work. This doesn't just apply to those who are self-employed. You have your brand. And in order to do well at work, you want people to buy into that brand, because you want them to trust you and have faith in you and know that you could do whatever role it is that you're wanting perhaps to move on to next. So there's so much that we could discuss in terms of nutrition. Last night I was kind of I'd written down loads, and I was then suddenly trying to whittle it down. And what I wanted to do was take it one step further than just the simple things that we hear all the time. Staying hydrated, getting adequate sleep, eating 5 portions of fruit and vegetables a day. Those are all super important, but actually most of us know those. We might not still do them, but most of us know those. So what I wanted to do was kind of take that add a layer of complexity to hopefully give you guys a few more tools that you've got kind of in your toolbox to start thinking about how you prioritize that foundation of physical well-being to reach that ideal performance state at the top. And also, if you're in a leadership role, what I think is really important at this point as well is to pause and think, what can you do for yourself? How can you role model this? But also, what space, what change can you create in your culture, in your immediate environment professionally, to give permission to other people to also prioritize this? Does that mean going back to the HR or the L&D department being like, I've just got this new idea, I've got this brainwave, and I'm happy for you to steal any of this content? We absolutely need to be addressing learning and development in a completely different way. Or we need to approach our wellbeing strategy in a different way and bring those two together. So what are you going to do for yourself, but what space can you create to help support others as well? Right, let's look now at these next 4 areas. So just like an athlete would really focus so much on the pitch training, the athlete's also going to focus on what they do off the pitch. And we accept that. We think that's normal. Of course, a professional footballer is going to have a dietitian, a nutritionist, and a full team of people to support and optimize their performance. And whilst we might not have the luxury of a personal nutritionist, there's lots of things that we can do ourselves to fuel ourselves adequately for the inevitable repeated competition day to day of being in work and having to show up and perform. And as already mentioned in the chat, the food you eat directly impacts your energy levels, your hormone levels, your mood, your reaction to stress, and your performance. And I've tried to narrow that down into 4 key areas for us to look at today. Okay, let's start with blood sugar. And funny enough, it's no coincidence that I've put a picture of a roller coaster. So it's still quite a new phenomenon to consider blood sugar in non-diabetics. However, I think there's some really valuable lessons that we can pull here in terms of performance. And some of you might have seen the Glucose Revolution or follow Glucose Goddess on Instagram. We're not necessarily taking it all the way to that extent. She's now brought out a supplement that you can take before you have sugar to try and help balance blood sugar. That's not where we're wanting to go. What I'm wanting to get across is the link between cognitive function and keeping your blood sugar as steady as we can. So stress impacts blood sugar and blood sugar impacts stress. So they work both ways. But what I find fascinating in terms of cognitive performance is even though the brain only accounts for 2% of our total body weight, it consumes 20% of the glucose, so what carbohydrate breaks down into in the body, from the food we eat. And it can only get that from the food we eat or from stores within our body. So because of this huge reliance on glucose, it's the brain's preferred energy source. If we are having varying levels of glucose throughout the day, and our blood glucose is doing crazy things, it's therefore quite obvious that's going to affect either positively or impair our cognitive function. So what's really important here is not about cutting out carbohydrates. We need carbohydrates, particularly the brain, but it's just thinking about how much and what type of carbohydrates. And we'll talk about that in a second. The roller coaster. Everyone will have felt this. Everybody will know this feeling. We wake up, we feel absolutely exhausted because of whatever reason, stress, carrying responsibilities through the night, too many glasses of wine the night before. So many reasons why we could feel exhausted. So we think, you know what, I really need some sugar. I'm going to have sugar in my tea or my coffee. I'm going to have a big bowl of cereal. I'm going to have a glass of orange juice, and that's going to get me going. And then by 10 o'clock in the morning, you've had this huge slump and you're sat at your desk, and this feeling of fatigue is almost in every cell of your body. And your eyes are like this. You can't keep them open. You can't concentrate in meetings. You lose your train of thought. That's the blood sugar roller coaster. So your blood sugar's gone super high, having a really high sugar breakfast. And then the body pumps out loads of insulin to send a message to the cells to store the sugar away in the cells. And then what we have is, because we've had so much insulin produced, the blood sugar goes woo and drops right down on the roller coaster. And this is called reactive hypoglycemia. So that big dip is entirely reactive because of the sugar you ate previously. And it leaves our brain cells starved of glucose, causing symptoms like lightheadedness, brain fog, poor concentration. Not eating regularly also has the same effect. Missing breakfast can also have the same effect in some people, giving you hunger cravings, encouraging overeating, and also this inability to think clearly. So let me know if you think that resonates with you. And if you've never had that feeling at your desk, I take my hat off to you, because I remember feeling it in my previous career quite often. Glycation. Okay, so this is a process when sugar interacts with proteins and fats in the bloodstream, and it creates something called an advanced glycation end product. And some of you, especially if you're into skin health, might have heard of these things. It's something that's really linked quite with aging. When we eat lots of sugar, we produce lots more of these advanced glycation end products, AGEs, and these have been linked to inflammation, oxidative stress, and degeneration of the brain. So again, consuming significant amounts of sugar throughout our lifetime and our professional career starts to impact the degradation of our brain, which sounds really quite extreme, doesn't it? The good thing is there's lots that you can do about it. And I know breakfast is always really controversial, and I know there'll always be questions about fasting. For the majority of us, having breakfast is really important to give your brain energy, give your brain fuel, and to blunt your stress response in the morning. There's a really fascinating study that split women into 3 different groups. One group had eggs and toast for breakfast. One group had cereal with milk and some orange juice. One group had croissant and orange juice. And all of the breakfasts were identical in terms of calories. So all of those breakfasts, same calorific value. But what was really fascinating was how that breakfast interfered with eating habits for the rest of the day. So the group that ate the eggs, the high protein, low sugar breakfast, on average consumed 500 calories less throughout the rest of the day. So what breakfast you eat not only affects your food choices and your feeling of fullness, but also really impacts your insulin sensitivity and your blood sugar balance for the rest of your day. Isn't that incredible? The power of one meal to influence the rest of the day, and also kind of how likely you are to perform optimally that day. Dressing your carbs. So this is where you pair carbohydrates. That could be anything from chocolate to sweets to bread to rice to starchy vegetables. Pairing it with protein, having it with meat, fish, tofu, having it with some fat, some cheese, some dairy, some avocado, some nuts and seeds, delays the rate at which that carbohydrate breaks down into sugar in your bloodstream. So trying to keep you off this roller coaster and just create a nice undulating blood sugar throughout the day, which is entirely natural. And we want little undulations. We just don't want huge, big roller coasters. Also, in terms of sleep, blood sugar sensitivity is really impacted, especially around kind of the 7-8 hour sleep. So anything less than that, you're going to be much less sensitive to insulin the following day, causing much bigger spikes and troughs, so exacerbating that feeling of, oh my gosh, I just need a coffee, I need some sugar. So again, if anybody relates to that, please let me know. Let me know in the chat, because I just feel like it's something that we're just not really ever taught, but something that just really contributes to, again, daily feelings of overwhelm. So you never feel like you've got that brain space to think optimally if you feel like you're falling asleep at 10 o'clock in the morning and again at 3:30. Okay, another controversial topic, coffee and alcohol. Nothing is wrong with enjoying either of those things. There's no such thing as bad or good things. We don't want to get away from that terminology. But I think corporate culture tries to tell us that it's, normalizes having coffee to pick ourselves up and also having wine to kind of wine ourselves, or whatever spirit, if you go slightly more hardcore, to wind ourselves down. And both of these things actually enhance that blood sugar roller coaster and the 3 p.m. crash. So caffeine produces a stress response. That's what makes us feel more alert. So it can push our cortisol levels up. It also sends our blood sugar a little bit crazy. So you might still be getting a 3 p.m. crash and you're thinking, well, I don't really eat that much sugary stuff. And I really invite you to do a period of time without caffeine and see if it's actually the caffeine that's causing that crash mid-afternoon, not just blood sugar. It lessens sleep quality with a half-life of around between 5 and 9 hours, depending on how well your liver detoxifies the caffeine. So if you're having a coffee at 3 in the afternoon, there's a chance that when you're trying to go to bed, you've still got some of that caffeine circulating in your body. It also impairs iron absorption, and iron deficiency is something that I see kind of chronically across a lot of women, particularly women kind of childbearing, menstruating age. So I kind of question you and give you a little challenge, is it serving you? Do you need it? How much do you actually need? And could you think about slowly cutting down? If you have more than 1 cup a day, cut down by a cup a week, do it slowly, otherwise you get the worst headaches. And just try without, see how it impacts that afternoon slump, see how it impacts your sleep. And if you feel really jittery, try having caffeine with food. Again, that might help a little bit more. See if there's been any. So a few comments here. Let me just respond to these. Roller coaster, way worse now you work from home, Sarah. Thanks for sharing that. Isn't it funny how our boundaries and our ability to justify ourselves to ourselves, spending time on ourselves, I think it's almost worse at home because the laptop's there and you think, oh, well, I just need to log on. Just need to get on, just need to log on. And then at some point during the day, I'll be able to pause and go for a wee and actually have a drink of water and maybe actually eat some food. But actually, we need to swap that around. Like I said, that oscillation between stress and rest. Rest and physical well-being is actually foundational. That needs to happen first before we do the stressful event. And you're going to be able to respond to everything that's in your inbox way better if you've prioritized yourself first in the morning. Have a routine, have a ritual, let it become your normal. And sometimes that does mean getting up 5 minutes earlier. Have a breakfast you prepared the night before. But I strongly recommend, if you're feeling that roller coaster, having a high protein savory breakfast is an absolute game changer. So it's interesting how the post-COVID landscape has changed that. I absolutely believe that. Kerry, instead of a crumpet and cheese, start having berries and high protein yogurt. Absolutely. And it's funny how having the high protein and the fat in the yogurt, which we really need. We need fat. It's the building block for most female hormones. You feel fuller for so much longer. You don't need that mid-morning snack. You don't need that sugar hit or that coffee as much because your body feels fuller for longer. And that's because protein and fat stay in your stomach for a bit longer, giving you that feeling of fullness. So it's really interesting to know that everyone's seeing that. Nicole, you've got fibromyalgia, and of course that takes, a lot of these principles are still really applicable. So it's all about optimizing the energy that you do have. So, blood sugar is going to be still really important in terms of managing chronic pain, as is looking at caffeine and alcohol. So again, all of this is still absolutely relevant for you. It's just the rate at which you can achieve some of these changes might be a little bit different. And there's something big about being kind to yourself. Right, alcohol. And this has been a hard journey for me as well, because it's taken me probably until very recently to really accept that optimizing physical well-being alongside consuming alcohol is quite difficult. And I've got some thyroid issues, which mean I'm cutting out alcohol completely at the moment. And I don't want to be one of those people who goes around bragging about cutting out alcohol, because I used to hate those people. But it does feel a lot better. So I'm happy to talk about that journey, maybe separately. How many of us have a glass of wine in the evening, especially after a really stressful day? That kind of on the sofa, kids are in bed, work is done, laptop's closed. I just need a drink and I need to switch my mind off. And it feels great in the short term. However, what you cannot deny is the impact on sleep quality. Something an athlete would never compromise on in terms of repair and recovery, but it also really puts us back on the blood sugar roller coaster and burdens the liver. So if the liver's working to try and break down the toxin that is alcohol, it's not working adequately in terms of balancing hormones. All of our waste hormones are taken through the liver, they're broken down, and then they're put out like you put your rubbish out. They're put out for the digestive tract or the urinary tract to then excrete those waste hormones. But if the liver's tied up managing alcohol in kind of panic state, then it's not managing blood sugar effectively, it's not managing hormone balance effectively. And that's sometimes what wakes you up in the middle of the night, actually, is your blood sugar dropping really low after consuming alcohol and your liver having to kick in, because the liver helps control blood sugar as well. It also really impacts our ability to produce a neurotransmitter that helps us feel calm. There's something called GABA. So that can be why you feel a little bit anxious the day after drinking. And I'm really starting to feel that more acutely, as I get older, now 37, is this anxiety after drinking. How is that helping us achieve optimal success? And I'm not saying that absolutely everybody should suddenly give up alcohol. There's a lot of pleasure to be had and enjoyment to be had in some amounts of alcohol, but just think, is it serving you? Do you need it midweek? Is it just a habit? Could you reward yourself in a different way? Could you kind of think about just having a drink at weekends? So there's a few things just to invite you to kind of think about there. Let me just quickly flick back to the chat and let's see. Absolutely, Nicole, talking about a credit card in terms of energy levels. I've also heard that described for chronic pain in terms of spoons, but you've got a certain number of spoons throughout the day and different activities take a number of spoons, but that's all the spoons you've got. I think a lot of us, even those not suffering from chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, could take a lot in terms of managing our energy expenditure and prioritizing ourselves, not always feeling like we have to serve others all the time at the cost of our own energy levels. So thank you for sharing those. And again, all the presentations I give at some stage will talk about the gut. And that's because it is so important, again, to all of these aspects of physical well-being, but also cognitive performance. And that's a bit I think we underestimate. We all know we want a healthy gut so that we don't feel bloated, so that we don't have digestive symptoms, so that we go to the toilet well. We don't always associate healthy gut with optimal success and performance. But the gut and the microbiome, so the organisms that live in our gut, is really heavily linked to cognitive performance. And what we're starting to see through research now is that manipulation of this microbiome could be a really positive avenue, a promising avenue for enhancing cognition. And there's a lot of more research needed. We're only kind of really entering into that now. And what I found really interesting is some research was done looking at how women respond to distressing images. And the stress response to those images correlated or was associated with the presence of different bacteria in the gut. Isn't that fascinating? That there's an association, not necessarily causation, but an association between what's living in our gut and how we respond to certain situations. And a lot of us all know that the gut and the brain are linked through something called the vagus nerves. This is part of our nervous system, that it's a two-way thing. When you're nervous and you get that feeling of butterflies in your tummy, that's that going one way. But equally, disruptions digestively can create feelings of anxiety, feelings of being unsettled, feelings of stress back to the brain. So let's have a little think about what the role of the microbiome is. It has a huge link with immunity. The different statistics between 70 to 90% of our immunity comes from our gut. And we all know how when we feel more stressed, when our performance is not optimal, that can often either be because we've caught a bug or we feel more vulnerable to catching various infections. But also our production of serotonin, our happy neurotransmitter, 90% of that is in the gut. It affects our brain, but it's produced in the gut. We also produce a number of our own B vitamins, which a lot of people don't know, in our gut. And B vitamins are essential for the production of energy. So you can really see now this synergy between how we perform and how our gut feels. So what can we do? That's all great. You're sat there thinking, oh my gosh, but I've got all these gut symptoms. What can I do? So firstly, blood sugar control, as I mentioned, firstly, through looking at what carbohydrates, how complex they are, thinking about caffeine and alcohol, which is going to affect blood sugar as well. The amount of sugar we eat and controlling our blood sugar has a direct impact on the balance of kind of good and bad bacteria. So what we're really wanting is to reduce sugar, which is what some of the bad bacteria kind of feeds off, and maximize fiber. This is what the good bacteria feeds off. And fiber can be soluble and it can be insoluble. So insoluble fiber creates like a gel-like substance in the digestive tract, and is going to help give our stools kind of form. And then insoluble fiber, kind of bran, the kind of the husky part, if you think, or skins of fruit and vegetables, is going to allow our stools to pass more easily through the body. And what's really fascinating about fiber is that we don't digest it as humans. We don't have the enzymes to digest it, but it's the key food source and energy source for the bacteria in our gut. So how do we best achieve this? It's best achieved through eating lots of different types of fruits and veggies. So trying to hit your 5 a day, but trying it over a week. One of the kind of goals that is used is to try and eat 30 different plant-based foods throughout the week. This can be nuts, seeds, fruit, vegetables, herbs, spices, and legumes. So again, bags of mixed salad, bags of mixed nuts, bags of mixed berries, tins of mixed beans, all really good ways of increasing the diversity of the fiber that you're getting to give you the microbiome, your gut bacteria, the best chance of proliferating in a healthy way. Probiotics, I get asked about these a lot. You can get lots of probiotics through food, through fermented food, live yogurt, kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha, kefir, anything that's been fermented. If you've got particular gastric symptoms or particular kind of anxiety and depressive symptoms, or extensive kind of historical use of antibiotics or painkillers like ibuprofen, I would sometimes recommend a period of taking a probiotic supplement in order to really kind of give your gut a bit of a head start. I would also invite you to just be careful about which probiotics you choose. Not necessarily spending money on the Yakult drinks or the Activia yogurts, but on a really well-recognized supplement, and I'm happy to talk about some brands later. But also to remember that if you've got a sensitivity to histamines, if you get lots of red flushing, sensitivity to wine, dark chocolate, then just be really careful around probiotics because they can cause an increased histamine response. Let me see if there's any comments from these. The gut question. Antibiotics for life. So Sarah, your gut microbiome will be affected by antibiotics. They're designed to kill pathogenic bacteria, bad bacteria, but unfortunately they tend to have a slightly wider remit than that, and penicillin will have an effect. I can't recommend anything individually on a call like this, but it's really important to discuss with your healthcare provider how you balance that. So again, I'm not sure about any other digestive symptoms, but see how you feel eating fermented foods. Again, if they cause any flushing, itching, it might be that you've got an intolerance to histamine. You can absolutely take probiotics alongside antibiotics. We just recommend a 3-hour gap between. But again, if you're going through a reputable company, and that might be in vivo, that might be Simprove, really, really, really good. That could be something like NutriAdvance, Cytoplan, BioCare. I urge you to get in touch with their customer services and say what you're on, say your position, and they'll be able to offer professional, qualified advice onto what's going to be safest for you. But definitely something that you should explore, not something that you're exempt from. Okay. Now, last slide, and then we'll open up for more questions. Last slide on the kind of nutritional bit. Micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals. What bits are really going to help you give you that brain space to optimize your long-term success? Oily fish, omega-3, an essential fatty acid, reduces inflammation, helps balance cortisol levels. So we're looking at 2 portions of oily fish a day. If you're not getting that, consider supplementing. Vegan supplements are available from algae. And if you are vegan or vegetarian, again, I would really strongly recommend you consider omega-3 supplements. If you're on any blood thinners or about to have surgery, again, I really encourage you to check that these are safe for you to take. Zinc, magnesium, 2 really, really powerful minerals. Zinc, responsible for repair, but also increasing that neurotransmitter GABA that helps us feel really calm. And I always laugh, and you'll have heard me talk about it before, that it's in oysters. Again, not normally available at the work cafeteria. Definitely wasn't when I was in the army. But again, we get it through meat products, animal products, and some nuts and seeds. Magnesium, something that we're really commonly deficient in a Western diet. And I feel that women, especially if you're getting bad PMS symptoms, feeling really anxious, struggling to sleep, something that you might want to consider. There's lots of different forms of magnesium. So again, talking to a healthcare professional about what form's going to be best for you might be advisable. It's in whole grains, which is why we don't get it a lot in our diet at the moment, because lots of our processed foods, ultra-processed foods, strip out the magnesium. But again, spinach, fish, dark chocolate, whole grains, all great sources of magnesium, as are Epsom salt baths, and also transdermal, you can get creams. L-theanine in green tea, it's an amino acid, and it influences the levels of serotonin in the brain, helping create better mental focus, improved sleep, and improved cognitive performance. So again, switching to kind of 3 cups of green tea a day can be seen to improve performance. But again, it might be that you need it in a supplement if you're wanting to get really therapeutic levels. Okay, nearly ready for questions. So new for 2024 is, bringing together this idea of learning development, optimizing your professional performance, but also your physical well-being and how those are integrally linked. I bring this together in a transformational program called She Thrives. We discuss everything that we've looked at today, but in 4 key stages to give yourself the capacity to feel like you can ultimately achieve more and to allow you to be happy. How many of us just go through life thinking we have to get on the next rung without actually stopping and thinking if we are happy? And I've had a number of women already start this program and complete it and having some really amazing results in terms of their professional development, but also how content they feel. I have a free workbook called Thrive in 5. So again, if you want to have a little look and see what tips you can really hone in on yourself, there's a QR code there for the Thrive in 5 workbook. I've got some information on She Thrives in the workplace, but also if you're still just not quite sure if stress, overwhelm, anxiety, not feeling like you're really reaching your full ability, feeling like you're meant for more, if you think that's impacting your professional performance, have a little look at my quiz there as well, and see what you think. I'd really love to continue this conversation with any of you outside of this. So again, drop me an email if any of this has been particularly pertinent to you. But let's have a little look now and see what questions people have a look at. Kerry, I'm a vegetarian, just started taking ground flax seeds or linseeds. Apparently it's amazing. So Kerry, really good question. Linseeds are absolutely amazing, and I encourage all women to be taking them, both those who are still cycling and menstruating. Perimenopause, really powerful because it's a phytoestrogen, helps balance estrogen in the body, and also postmenopausally. It also helps in terms of soluble and insoluble fibers. It helps keep the gut healthy and keeps the bowels moving. In terms of omega-3, it does have a form of omega-3 called ALA, and this is great. But unfortunately, the body needs to go through a few processes to convert ALA into DHA and EPA. God, that's lots of letters, isn't it? Which are the active forms of omega-3 that we really need. So and we've got different levels of efficiency and how well we convert that. And that's based on kind of genetic predisposition and some environmental factors. So you will be getting omega-3 from flax seeds. You'll be getting loads of other benefits, but you won't be getting a massive dose of omega-3. So I would consider, I don't know what the rest of your diet's like. I can't say specifically. Have a look into omega-3 supplements, vegan or vegetarian ones. Bare Biology, a really well regarded, reputable source of both fish-derived omega-3 and also vegan omega-3 as well. Absolutely keep going with the flaxseed. So many other benefits alongside the omega-3. I hope that helps. So really happy to answer. And Bare Biology. Yep, Bare Biology. So in terms of their fish oils, obviously not vegetarian, they're fish oils, and they test every single batch for heavy metals. And that's really important in terms of taking an omega-3 supplement, is that we don't want to be kind of trying to do something really good, but then burdening our body with some kind of toxic compounds that can often be found in oily fish. For everybody who's not vegetarian and is happy to eat oily fish, again, aiming for 2 portions a week, especially during pregnancy, really important. This could be things like salmon, but it could also be things like anchovies, sardines, mackerel. So again, it's not just big portions of salmon. Tinned fish counts just as well, way more affordable. Unfortunately, tuna's just been down-regulated, is no longer classed. It's lost its oily fish status. I'm sure they're gutted. So again, lots of things you can consider in terms of how you introduce omega-3, how you introduce zinc, magnesium, and again, really starting to look at dietary change first. But if you think you need a little bit more, then talking with a healthcare professional in terms of supplementation, particularly if you feel like you're super stressed at the moment, because you'll be burning through a lot of those micronutrients at an increased rate to be able to keep producing stress hormones. So I'm going to wrap up there, or I think some people typing a few more bits. I really hope today has allowed you to see just how foundational physical well-being, of which nutrition is one of those pillars, is to optimizing your long-term performance. And I'd love to hear from any of you as to what changes you might want to make, and how you could start to think about those little changes in your life. I will send a PDF of the slides to Ed and the team, and then we can look at getting those slides distributed as a PDF.
Yeah, I'll share them out with the video recording as well.
Brilliant. Great. Thanks for that, Ed. Thank you, everybody. Again, please feel free to email me with any more personal questions. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rebecca, for that. Really interesting. And we will get the recording out as well as soon as possible. So thanks once again for joining us. Really great session.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Thanks, Ed.